North Korea may go nuclear, Abe talks the Yasukuni shrine, and updates on the Sewol tragedy here in South Korea. I'm Steve Miller. These stories and more are on the April 25th edition of Asian News Weekly. Welcome everyone to the show. Our first story this week is of course an update from the Sewol tragedy in South Korea. Now, this sinking has gripped the nation for more than a week, prompting broadcasters to alter programming and even the government to cancel or postpone several annual festivals. As the search and later recovery efforts took place, information broke and the story seemed to change every single hour. So this is what I've compiled as an update for the past week. It is with a heavy heart that I must announce that as of this podcast recording, the total confirmed fatalities now numbers 171 souls. Unfortunately, as experts predicted, no survivors have been found since Wednesday, leading most to come to the grim realization that all those still missing are in fact dead. This means the total number of fatalities in this disaster will rise to above 300. Now, criticism has been swift and strong against the crew and government for allowing this tragedy to occur. The captain and 6 crew members have been arrested for numerous crimes surrounding the tragedy, including dereliction of duty. Some others are also being investigated, but one has to question, though, if these arrests came too quickly. If the events themselves are not still fully understood, how can authorities accurately place blame? Transcripts between the Sewol and Jindo Control show the ferry crew asking repeatedly for assistance as the vessel listed. They also informed Control that passengers were already trapped, and the Sewol crew was concerned that if passengers left the vessel, there would be no one there to rescue them. However, the general consensus is that the crew panicked and that they were extremely inexperienced. Local broadcaster JTBC reports they were able to obtain records of a phone call between a teen passenger and authorities, a full 3 minutes before the ship even called for help. The owners of the company have been barred from leaving the country and are now under investigation for a wide range of financial crimes. In a message posted on the company website, they said, quote, "We pray for the Sewol victims who lost their precious lives due to the accident. We prostrate ourselves before the victims' families and beg for forgiveness." This past Monday, President Park Geun-hye called the actions of the captain and crew tantamount to murder. And after a statement of that nature, one must question if it will be at all possible for those charged to receive any kind of fair and impartial treatment in the South Korean courts. In fact, before the end of the week, prosecutors were also contemplating charging the captain with homicide by omission. A Wall Street Journal poll said that nearly 80% of those in Korea, and Korean language speakers who read the Wall Street Journal post, said that Park Geun-hye's actions and statements were unfair and unwarranted. Parents and the general public have also lambasted the rescue response. It's something that's very easy to do, especially when officials release statements saying that Navy and Coast Guard divers aren't as capable as private divers. Quote, "This practice of blaming government for anything comes from the medieval kingdoms, when the king was the owner of the country and had all the fortune and power. Then came the imperial and authoritarian governments that were against, not for the people," said Kim Ji-myung of the Korean Heritage Education Institute. Quote, "These terrible tragedies keep happening because Korean society has focused only on fast progress while treating safety regulations as a hindrance. The government, businesses, and the whole of society need to reflect on these fatal shortcomings," said the chosen Ilbo. So what do we really know about the ill-fated Sewol? Well, the ship was built about 20 years ago in Japan, and in 2009, its sister vessel, the Ariake, also capsized. Chonghaemin Marine Company, which operated the ferry, has been involved in numerous accidents over the past few years. In addition, several changes were made to the Sewol to increase the number of passengers, and officials are actually investigating whether or not proper inspection of the ship was made prior to its departure. As of Sunday afternoon, Chonghaemin Marine Company has reported different numbers for passengers, cargo, and vehicles. Investigators also believe that the vessel may have had 3 times the recommended payload on board. Speculation is that Chonghaemin Marine Company's operational license will also be canceled due to this tragedy. Preliminary external hull examination has not revealed any damage, indicating the Sewol may not have run aground, but rather the sharp turn made by the third officer at the helm may have initiated the events that unfolded. It's unclear why the turn was made, and could be due to a complex combination of mechanical failures and environmental conditions. It was originally reported that the vessel was off course, but maritime officials have said there is no one correct course between Incheon and Jeju. The Sewol was in fact traveling along one of the many routes available. Grief counselors have been in Jindo where families are located. However, the counselors report that families aren't making use of their services. While it's easy for those in the West to question this and ask why, there is considerable stigma against using psychological treatment here in Korea. Quote, "We tried to set up a joint psychological consultation unit on the site, but things have become so intense and sensitive that we had to scrap the plan," said Jung Kyung-suk in a phone interview with the Korea Herald. Jung and a couple of others from the Dongjak-wi Center, a public psychological clinic in Seoul, have been helping families cope with emotional stress since last Friday. There is considerable fear that parents may commit suicide if they lose their only child, much in the same way the school's vice principal did. South Korea's Ministry of Education has now banned all school trips, at least until the month of June. The office said this was a precautionary measure to ensure the safety of all students on trips, but it appears more of a reactionary measure in response to online criticism. One online commenter said, "Instead of working harder to fix the problem, they want to ban it altogether such that their incompetence will not surface. You might as well tell children to stay at home and take a nap every single day." Another commenter said, "Scrapping school trips is not the best way to protect our children. We need to get rid of our deep-rooted insensitivity to safety so that we can create a society where children can go anywhere and be safe." The sad truth of this disaster was that it occurred following an incredible chain of events, most, if not all of which, were entirely preventable. As more events unfold, follow Asian News Weekly on Facebook and Twitter to receive updates. South Korea's Yonhap News is reporting increased activity around North Korea's nuclear test facilities. The report from an unnamed Korean government official cites increased vehicle movement saying, quote, "North Korea's nuclear test is imminent." Daniel Pinkston, senior analyst and Northeast Asia deputy director for Crisis Group, tweeted the test may occur during President Obama's visit to South Korea between April 25th and 26th. He said it was a great week to demonstrate and bolster their nuclear deterrent. North Korea has been steadily making progress with its nuclear program for the past year, and in recent weeks, it has been warning of a new type of test. China has urged North Korea to abandon its program and stated it will not tolerate a nuclear North Korea. Should Kim Jong-un go forward with the expected test, it's unclear how swift the reaction will come from other nations. It was the third North Korean test that set off tension in the region a little over a year ago, and experts are unsure if North Korea will carry out the planned test while Obama is visiting Seoul. If they were to conduct the test while the President of the United States was on the Korean Peninsula, North Korea would exasperate responses from the United States, South Korea, and even China. In fact, it would also signal that China has lost all ability to temper Kim Jong-un's actions. A smarter move for North Korea would be to conduct the test once Obama leaves South Korea. But when has Kim ever acted wisely? In all honesty, conducting the test with Obama near would greatly inflate Kim's ego and necessitate a change in how the rest of the world deals with North Korea. The current situation puts the international community in a precarious position on how to curb North Korea's desire to become a nuclear state. The time has come to finally decide what to do with North Korea. With its track record of human rights abuses and continued pursuit of nuclear weapons, what course of action should the international community take? Visit Asian News Weekly for links to the stories mentioned in this week's podcast. While there, you can leave your thoughts in the comment section. You can also share them with us via Facebook and Twitter and receive updated information throughout the week. Just go to facebook.com/Asia News Weekly or follow @Asia News Weekly on Twitter. President Barack Obama spent the first leg of his delayed Asian tour in Japan. Nothing from the meeting with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was anything more than I expected. However, the Japanese leader did once more try to make his case for the controversial Yasukuni Shrine. It was the second time in this past week. Continuing to push the issue, Abe might be negating any positive gestures his government has made in recent weeks. Speaking at a Tokyo gathering, he said, quote, "It's a fact that Yasukuni is the main facility of remembrance, and the survivor's family also feel this way," end quote. A fact that can't be changed by government dictate. His statement was in response for Japan to create or designate another war memorial, one that doesn't have the same connotation as Yasukuni. On Monday, Abe sent a ritual offering to the shrine, and approximately 150 Japanese cabinet members also made trips to the shrine this past week as part of the Spring Festival. South Korea and China view the shrine as a monument to Japan's militaristic past, and visits by prominent government officials tantamount to glorifying its imperial past and condemn the gift made by Abe. According to a survey conducted by the Asahi Shimbun, 74% of Chinese and 67% of South Koreans dislike Japan. Kazumasa Hirano, president of a company in Japan, said anti-Japanese sentiment in China was a factor in the company's decision to build its first overseas factory in Thailand. He said, quote, "You might as well go to a place where people like you, not hate you." End quote. The Yasukuni Shrine is the resting place for over 2 million souls who died in service of Japan's emperor. South Korea and China tend to focus on the 14 Class A war criminals, which includes Hideki Tojo, when mentioning the shrine, and not the factory workers, not the teachers, and not the animals also enshrined there. Some say a way to resolve the controversy would be to unshrine the war criminals. But Abe says Japan's constitutional separation of church and state prohibits the government from making such a request. Others have suggested designating the Chidoriga-Fuchi National Cemetery, which is publicly administered. It contains the remains of 360,000 unidentified civilians and military personnel from World War II. It's a recommendation that many think Japan should consider, since such visitations by the royal family and government officials don't elicit any negative reactions. Even United States Secretary of State John Kerry has visited the Chidoriga-Fuchi National Cemetery. It was a first for such a high-level cabinet member of a U.S. administration. But what do you think? Can Japan ever have a war memorial that doesn't upset its neighbors? Please leave your comments on the podcast page or tweet them at Asia News Weekly. Kyodo News reports Japan will continue to evaluate the Kono Statement. It's the publicly made statement of apology which acknowledges the Japanese military coercion of Korean and other women into brothels. This news comes on the heels as Seoul and Tokyo have agreed to monthly meetings to discuss the issue and further compensation for survivors. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said he will not rescind the Kono Statement after strong opposition was voiced not only from South Korea and China, but also the United States. However, some in Japan and his party feel differently. Ikumi Yoshimatsu, a public figure in Japan who went public this past December regarding her horrific story of attempted abduction and abuse towards women in Japan in the entertainment industry, recently appeared on the Robin Morgan CBS radio show to discuss what Yoshimatsu calls a culture of silence towards crimes against women. Morgan asked Yoshimatsu her thoughts on the comfort women and the Kono Statement.
And it seems that the opinion of some people in the Japanese right wing is that these women were common prostitutes, and all 80,000 to 200,000 of them. So they are not on an apology. Yeah. But the testimonies of the women who survived provides them wrong. And as a Japanese, I am embarrassed and ashamed of these comments, and as a woman, I am outraged that apologizing is even an issue.
When Yoshimatsu's statement was translated into Japanese, Right-wing netizens began flooding her social media accounts. They called her a traitor, ignorant beauty queen, and alleged that she was using sneaky propaganda to discount Japan. Yoshimatsu posted an apology to her blog and Facebook page for any misunderstanding caused by the translation, all the while Korean netizens praised her. With such divisive opinions lingering in Japan, director-level discussions between Korea and Japan are sure to be tempered and not provide any meaningful movement towards reconciliation in the near future. Are you interested about life in Asia? Well, you know what? Every single day I share photos and videos from my life and travels, like eating honey ice cream, exploring abandoned buildings, or sharing photos from the streets and back alleys of Seoul. So connect with me personally on Twitter. I'm at ChiRanger there. That's at QI In an effort to assist the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and their territorial disputes in the South China Sea with China, both the United States and Japan have agreed to provide surveillance assistance. During his visit to Asia, United States President Barack Obama plans on discussing the issue with various stakeholders. According to the Yomiuri Shimbun, a Japanese newspaper, Japan and the United States are expected to offer patrol vessels to several ASEAN members. They will also begin a training program for member states' Coast Guard personnel to protect against pirates and suspicious vessels. It is expected this support will increase information sharing between member nations and act as a further deterrent against China. Quote, improving ASEAN's ocean surveillance capability will benefit Japan and the United States, said an unnamed Japanese government official. It was April 17, 1975, when the Khmer Rouge overran Cambodia's capital and began a wave of terror. Khmer Rouge leaders Nuon Che and Khieu Samphan are awaiting verdicts in the first trial phase and waiting on the next stages of their trials to begin. They are accused of several crimes, including genocide. Quote, first, we can say that large-scale offenses like crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide have no statute of limitations. Second, this shows us that in whatever circumstances, those who are responsible for these crimes must be brought to justice for their roles in causing deaths to people, said Long Panhavut, who monitors the tribunal at the Cambodia Justice Initiative. Government spokesperson Pei Sipan said, quote, we've learned a lot from experience which had led to violent change like what the Khmer Rouge did, and their nation-building process based on violence, end quote. The Khmer Rouge regime is accused of committing nearly 2 million Cambodian deaths during its horrific 4-year rule. Japan is planning on sending between 100 and 150 soldiers to Yonaguni Island. It's located some 150 kilometers from the disputed Senkaku Diaoyu Islands. It's expected the deployment will take place within the next 2 years and mark a significant increase in Japan's presence, as only 2 police officers are currently stationed there. Japan is planning on constructing a new radar base. This facility would be much closer to China than Japan's other installations, and allow Japan to monitor the Chinese mainland and other ships or aircraft in the disputed area. Japanese Defense Minister Itsunori Onodera said, quote, this is the first deployment since the United States returned Okinawa, and calls for us to be more on guard are growing. I want to build an operation able to properly defend islands that are part of Japan's territory. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said, China's growth is a chance for Japan, and for the world as well. China is Japan's largest trading partner, and we are in inseparable relations economically. On the other hand, it is true that China is challenging the status quo with force in the East China Sea and the South China Sea. End quote. This further deployment by Japan is sure to anger China and worsen ties. This particular dispute is the hottest contested area, and while confrontations between China and Japan have waned in recent months, this is sure to stir them up again. While China may not like the additional deployment of Japanese troops so close to their border, Japan is certainly within their rights to do so. In fact, it makes sense to place detection facilities near national borders where one can monitor encroaching vessels. However, one has to wonder if this move is more about angering China or promoting national defense. But what's your opinion? Leave your thoughts on our page or tweet them to @AsiaNewsWeekly. The current underwater search area for Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 is a 10-kilometer diameter area on the bottom of the Indian Ocean. Australian officials say it could take at least a week to complete a comprehensive search of the area. A deep-sea United States Navy drone is now conducting a methodical search, but definitive proof of the missing plane still eludes investigators. The drone is diving to depths in excess of 4.5 kilometers. That's nearly 6 miles underwater. And those involved say the search will continue, looking at video and sonar information until the plane is found. A Malaysian official met with family members this past weekend to discuss the possibility of providing financial assistance to families. While nothing was settled, it is still unclear if financial assistance will come from the government, Malaysian Airlines, or both. That's it for this week's episode. But before I go, I'd like to thank you for your words of prayer and hope that flooded my pages via Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube regarding the students and other passengers on board the Sewol. Like any disaster of this magnitude, we as a society came together and rallied behind those in need. I'd like to thank you for joining me this week, and of course, you can always reach me by emailing me at podcast@asianewsweekly.net. If you use Stitcher or iTunes, I hope you'll take a quick second to rate the show there. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Again, I'm Steve Miller, and until next time, stay true to yourself and always be awesome. Asia News Weekly is written and produced by Steve Miller and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.